I opened the door, and standing there was a red-haired, freckle-faced man with the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. When my mother accepted Mr. Jackson as boarder, my heart took wings. We became the closest of friends. My mother, Andy's friend Mr. Overton, Andy and I'd oftentimes go picnicking down by the river and spend the afternoons in fine conversation. I related to Andy how I'd come west with my father. Daddy had served 3 terms in the Virginia House of Burgesses when I was a youngster. During that time, I had the pleasure of meeting and visiting many famous Americans, including George Washington. When I was 12 years old, my father took our family on a perilous 2,000-mile journey down the Holston River to the Tennessee River, down the Tennessee to the Ohio, up the Ohio to the Cumberland, and down the Cumberland to a brand new settlement known as Nashville. Our trip was chronicled later in part of Theodore Roosevelt's book, The Winning of the West. We moved again when I was 17, to settlements in Kentucky, and it was there that I met a local Revolutionary War hero, Captain Charles Robards, my husband. He was handsome and romantic, but he turned out to be insanely jealous, a hard drinker and a womanizer. And when I found out he had an affair with one of our servants, I could bear it no longer. I left him. I came here to live with my mother and have my path cross yonder. But Andy, I heard that Charles was coming here to take me back with him.
And come he did. And when we met, he ranted about how I had been too intimate with his wife. And I told him if he ever said anything like that again, I'd cut off his arm. And on second thought, I had a notion to do that anyway. Well, Robards departed only to come back with the law and a warrant for my arrest. So I took my knife out and I began to examine it very carefully with glances at Robards in between. He lit out of there like a jackrabbit. And since the complainant didn't show up in court, the magistrate had to dismiss the case. Robards went back to Kentucky. But Rachel later received word that he was returning to bring her back by force.
Well, I couldn't return with him, so I fled to Natchez in Spanish territory. Andy escorted me there, and we heard months later that Robards had filed for divorce in Virginia. It was 1791, and Andy and I were both 24 years of age.
So I immediately asked Rachel to marry me, which she did, returning with me to Nashville and settling down to a rather normal life. And then we got wind of something terrible. It was 1793, and we learned that Robards had just secured the divorce. 2 years earlier, he had only obtained an enabling act, which simply gave him the right to plead his case, which he had waited until now to do. Legally, Rachel and I had been living in adultery. Although I was dead set against it because I felt it would be an admittance of guilt, my friends persuaded me to marry Rachel again once Robards' divorce was finalized, which I did on January the 17th, 1794.